The keywords that we got from the previous conversation: passion, burning out, and research papers. So, when I was researching about you and your work, so the thing that's marketed is like you've written or like contributed to 90 research papers. But I would like to like uh, deep dive into the fact like what was the mindset, or like how did you motivate yourself, and how did you get that patience to eventually be able to perform in such a manner? Because to be able to write or contribute in such manner requires not only consistency, but like you, when you're researching, there's like always a chance that you'll fail. You keep on failing, but then you are in that process of consistently trying, which many people quote it as sadhana, which is like you keep on doing the thing regardless of the outcome. That whether I'll pass or fail, I'll try every day, and eventually I'll come up with a solution, or I'll have a fruit. So I would like you to like elaborate on this part, like the not the fancy part, but the part like how does one achieve something like that?
So again, I think these numbers don't really matter, right? I mean, there are people who have written many more papers than me, and have had many more citations than me. So, right, we shouldn't kind of get too stuck on 90 papers or whatever. It's
Yeah.
partly 90 papers because of the fact that I was in academia for a long time too. And in academia in general in the West, there is a real push for people to be research active, which is not the case here in India.
Yeah.
Right? So, so that's not a big deal. I think it really comes back to passion and excitement, right? If you can actually get intrigued by something and follow that, every human is capable of creating great things. So if you can identify something that interests you, you find something that uh, even when you're sleeping, you actually dream about, right? So right now, my passion project is a product that we are building for education, right, and
Okay.
teaching of AI and machine learning. So out of the Sabudh Foundation. So this project that we are working on, EduCollab, very often at night I will wake up and I'll think, oh my God, this is something that we could do, right? And this is how it can benefit students. And
Yeah.
so really it comes down to having that passion, right? You know, a marriage without passion is just as bad as a job without passion, right? So,
Yeah.
so in that sense, you really need to find something that excites you. You could learn music and rag music for years and still be no good at it
Yeah.
because actually you're learning it only because your mother told you have to, right? But the moment that switch happens where you start enjoying it,
Yeah.
that's when it's going to explode, right?
Yeah.
And that's when you're going to really get good at it.
Yeah.
The same is true for children who are dragged through to the Gurdwara every day and made to sit there for 3 hours by
Yeah.
their parents, thinking that they're doing great service to Sikhism by that, for their
Yeah.
children. The truth of the matter is, a lot of those kids are actually, really upset about this, right? And the moment they have an opportunity, they'll move away from that concept.
Yeah.
So you actually have a reaction, right? So what you need to do instead is to create a passion within the child, right?
Yeah.
To get excited about something. And I
Yeah.
think it's really. I mean, I really think that we need to do a better job of bringing up our children so that they have a passion, right?
Yeah.
Because that passion, and then of course, through life, you have to have a life partner that also respects your passion and says, okay, I mean, this is what you are passionate about. It's not your sort. You know,
Yeah.
this is just something that everybody has a second aspect to, right? So having all of those ingredients are just as important as anything else. So if you
Yeah.
can identify that passion and you can have that support system around you that allows that passion to flourish, that's all you can hope for.
Yeah, definitely. So I was thinking about that sake that comes in Gurbani. I guess it's of Bhagat Faridji, where his mother used to give him that gurdi dali, and then at one day it was like she missed out, but then the passion was inside, so which eventually made him do his namaz.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's what we need to do, right? We need a hook to get kids in, but we shouldn't make it into a drudgery. The moment we make anything into a drudgery, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Right? So the moment, I mean, that's what I was saying for the data scientists also, right? So if somebody joins a job which he, thinks, okay, I'm going to join this because I'm going to get double my salary, after a while it becomes not worth it,
Yeah.
right?
Definitely.
Because you suddenly start thinking, this is like terrible. This is not what I want to do. And then you just get upset. So, you're never going to last. So that's true for every piece of your life.
So now, seeing the fact that you have worked a lot on recommender systems, and then I'm not like very like it's not like that I have very much experience or I know much to be able to like ask wise questions, but then I'll still try to. So so basically, you mentioned about EduLab, right?
Educolab. Yeah.
EduCollab, right? So I was looking into your that video from I guess Analytical Vidya. So do tell me if I'm right or wrong. So basically, the idea is that of EduCollab is basically seeing the interest of that specific child based on what he would be relevant for him to learn. You recommend the right content. Am I right on
Right.
that?
Right.
So you were also talking about content-based filtering, like just catching the words from your talk. Not, I might not have that much knowledge, but still, I would like to fancy on that. You talk about content filtering, then collaborative filtering, and then also using hybrid filtering, like hybrid solutions,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Right.
So that was like the sort of your understanding. Like when I was looking into the lecture which it talked about, like it's not just the user that we are concerned about. At times, it's also the peer group or the cluster that that specific users falls into. So it's like you have this sort of understanding. Yes, in this scenario, I'll use this problem. So when you are approaching a new recommender system problem, so like what's your flow, what's your pattern for, or what's your tips for anybody who wants to pursue a new problem? So if you could elaborate on your flow.
See, recommender systems is no different to any other machine learning problem, right? In the end of the day, there are two ways we can look at recommender systems. One is where we are trying to predict the rating for an item that would be consumed by a user, which is a regression problem. And the other is what is called a item subset problem, right? Where you're actually saying out of a big, large group of 100 things or, 100,000 things, how can I pick 10 things that somebody's going to be interested in? Which is very much like information, retrieval, right? Where you're saying Google is doing that for us, right? Where we give a search prompt. So, whether it's recommender systems or any other machine learning problem, the process remains the same, right? The first thing is to actually understand what is the business problem,
Yeah.
right? Once you get an understanding of what the problem is within the business, you actually look at, what is the way that people are solving that problem today, right? So that you get an understanding of what is the cost of providing that solution, what is the process, what are the possible errors that can take place in that process, what's the accuracy of that decision making. And then you also look at, okay, if I am able to create a machine learning solution here, uh, how does that get plugged into the current IT infrastructure, right? So the deployment of the model. It seems strange that even before we started development, we start looking at how would we deploy a solution. Yeah. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of machine learning problems in industry or projects fail because people haven't realized that they have no sensible way of even deploying the model. So even if you do a fantastic machine learning job, if the business can't leverage that output, then what's the use of it? It's seen as a failed project by the management, right? So you actually consider all of those aspects before you actually start then looking at what are the data assets that are there. When we talk about a problem, you need to understand where is that data coming from? How was it collected? Right? What are the biases within that data? Right? So news recommendation, for example, if the news website, you have an editor that's deciding what 10 stories go in front of everybody every day, then those are going to be the most popular stories. It's not necessary that the those were the stories of interest for people, right? So you're creating a bias within the data collection, right? So understanding those biases, understanding, if, what are the different nuances to how people actually interact with their system? What kind of people interact with their system? These are all the things that you have to take into account. So in a recommender system, if you were building a collaborative filtering engine, but you don't have rating, right? It's a 0 or a 1. Somebody consumed it or didn't consume it. The way you do matrix factorization for collaborative filtering then is different from when you would have rating, right? So understanding what that data actually represents. If you have lots of new users or you have a lot of new stories as a news recommendation or a new set of items that the retailer is going to sell, you realize that actually you're going to have a cold start problem, right? So you can't just use collaborative filtering. You need to have some way of addressing each of these subsets, right? The new user. How do you actually treat the new user? How do you create a solution that maximizes your probability to get a signal from them of what's interesting to them, right? So do you give them a random set of items? Do you kind of bias that in some way based on the generic consumption pattern? Those are things you need to think about. Then when you think about, okay, if I have new items, how do I start, bringing that out to them? You've got to start thinking in terms of, again, collaborative filtering can't work there. So content-based filtering is a possibility. Do you have content there? What content do you have? Is that going to be useful, right? Or do you actually find a way of, just randomly inserting some of the new items with the hope that you're actually going to get some users to click on them, right? So you really need to think about segmenting all of your users of your system. You have to think about how are you going to address various issues that come up in the business conversations you have. And the most important thing is to think about what is the way you're going to measure the accuracy. Right? Because accuracy itself may not be as important to the business. Right? So it could actually be the fact that they want stickiness. They want people to come back more often. Right? So you're actually saying that maybe more important than accuracy, where somebody who's read a Salman Khan article is going to get 5 Salman Khan articles. I want diversity. Right? Because today I'm not in the Salman Khan mood. I want to read something else, and you're only giving me Salman Khan, so I go there. So there are all these different factors that you need to take into account even before you start actually building the final solution. And so this is where the data scientist spends most of his time, right? And this is where you can add the most value also. So what you get here is exposure to different domains. One of the most exciting things about being a data scientist is the fact that you can play in a different person's backyard every day, right? You could be predicting power output from wind farms today based on weather data and understanding of wind farms, the layout. The next day, you could be looking at how do I help NGO raise more money through the fundraisers that they run in Facebook, right? And the next day, you could be looking at how do I help suppliers match with opportunities in government so that they can actually provide services to government and make money that way, right? Or the next day, you could be building a recommender for recommending what your wife should be cooking in your kitchen. So, the excitement of a data scientist, and this is why you should become a data scientist, is the fact that if you like solving problems, right? Problem solving should excite you. And after that, that's where the data scientist really comes in. The actual model building pieces will get automated in time. I don't think it's going to happen in a rush, but will get automated in a time. But you need to architect how, most complex solutions don't just require one machine learning algorithm. There are multiple machine learning algorithms in different aspects, and output of one is feeding into the next, right? And so actually building that whole pipeline is where you are adding value.
You're able to have that tailor-made effect rather than a generic suit that everyone can wear but does not fit well.
And for youngsters, they have to have a desire to learn, right? And I go back to that because I meet a lot of youngsters who are just looking for better salaries. Those will come. but you need to be patient right now. It is the sadhana that I was talking about, right? In the old scriptures, we hear about, or the epics, we hear about how there was a Guru Shishya Parampara,
Yeah.
right? You need to actually follow that Guru Shishya Parampara here, because that's the only way you're really good with it, right? And then, of course, I'm not suggesting that they should be mistreated like some gurus of the past used to do. But the truth of the matter is that sometimes you need to go through that rigor, right? To be able to actually know whether you are going to last, right? When in classical Indian music, the gurus would make the people who would come to them saying, "Make me a shishya," clean their house even. It showed whether they could go down to that level and do stuff. Were they really passionate enough? They stick through the hard labor that is required in learning classical music, right? So I'm not suggesting that that should be the way interns should be treated. Actually, so it would take me that way. I think, but in the end of the day, you've got to show that passion today. The youngsters have to say, "I'm here for learning." I'm not so worried about the money. The money will come.
So definitely the point that you were talking about, the Guru Shishya thing, that you have to give your mind eventually to follow the Guru, and then eventually you get the thinking, you get the Sadbuddhi, Sabudh. So yeah, so that's my next question only. Like I was looking into the names of your organizations like Tatras and Sabudh. So obviously, I would like to know what these names mean and what you do through your various organizations. But then these names sort of seem to have a spiritual meaning. So, what that's like sort of my perception. So, when we're talking about Tatras, are we talking about the gradient which eventually descends to the global minima? Is that the tat we're talking about? And then we have that information. We have the sadbuddhi and we make the right decisions, or like what is it?
You have got it right. So not that I connected the two names, but you are right. So I mean, the whole idea of tat and ras, right? The joy of getting to the essence of the problem, right? Which is a global minima, as you're saying. So that's good. And so when we were talking about setting up the name, uh, we actually initially called the company Algorithmic Insight, right?
Yeah.
So
The fancy AI domain name, yeah.
so it became AI. Algorithmic Insight could be shortened to AI. It was all very cool, right? So this was back in 2012. We actually came up with that name, and I'd actually set up Tatras more as a company where I wanted to pursue education, right? So specifically, I was kind of looking at creating resources for children to learn Gurmukhi and so on. So it was actually Tatras Infotainment at the time. But then my American partner in the business, he says, Algorithmic Insight is too complicated a name, right? So by the time I kind of say Algorithmic Insight, I get my tongue twisted anyway, and then the person who's listening is already confused, right? So so he said, but I like the word Tatras, right? And I explained to him what it means, and so he started saying, oh, this is cool, like we should call it that. And of course, at that time, of course, in America, everybody calls it Tatras and all sorts of, kind of weird ways. And I said, okay, I'll live with that. At least, in India, people will know Tatras. But of course, to my dismay, most people in India also mispronounces it as Tatras and all sorts of things.
Because eventually that you fancy that, yeah, it'll be some sort of a fancy name, Tatras, and yeah.
Maybe, or I think I've always believed that as an ancient civilization that we do have in our country, we have a lot to offer, and we tend to have this problem in our mind, right? We grow up believing that the West is better, and I don't believe that, right?
Which is very sad.
Yeah, and for 22 years, I lived in the United Kingdom before I came back to India, right? And throughout that period, also, I never felt in any way less than anybody, right? And I think we need to have that self belief that we have a lot to offer to the world. And I'm not, the kind of person who believes that we are the best. We are Sikhs, right? And the Sikhs, we grow up bowing our head to the Guru Granth Sahib, which has writings of Muslims, Hindu, lower castes, upper castes,
Yeah.
Sikhs, everybody, right? And so we grow up with Kabir as much as we do with Guru Nanak, right? So Sant
Yeah.
Kabir tells us that Abbal Allah Nur Paya Kudrat ke sab bande, right? So
Yeah.
everybody is equal. And the truth of the matter is, anybody who tries to prove that one person is not as capable as another is a fool, in my view, right? And these are
Yeah.
strong words. But so, we in India, we have our own biases. In the West, they have their own biases. But if we take a child that is born in India and a child that is born in America and give them the same exposures, I'm sure they'll both be as capable as each other, right?
Definitely.
And so we have to believe that. And in a world where most kids these days believe that America is the coolest thing, and nowadays, of course, Canada is the place to go to, especially in the Punjabi community, you have to
Yeah.
realize that what we have is such wealth, right? That we must not ever give up on that, right? And so, we have to recognize that we have a place in society just as much as anybody else. And so, in fact, in Tatras, when I talk to my clients in the US, I say, look, we are not interested in being a cheap alternative to some other company, right? We are not working for you. We are a partner with you. So if
Yeah.
I can wake up at 10 o'clock at night to talk to you, or wake up at 7 in the morning to talk to you, you can do the same, right? And so we don't have night shifts. We in our company, we do not encourage people, staying up late to talk to the US clients, right? The US clients can also work with us. We
Yeah.
want to be there with them because we provide value,
Yeah.
not because we are cheaper, right? And for them to recognize that, I think it's really important to have Indian names to the company,
Yeah.
right? So that they're intrigued and they actually ask, what does this mean, right? Or where's this name come from, or
Yeah.
why is it this, right? And so I think that's why we must have an Indian character to our names. And, that's the only way we can make people kind of get off their high horse, which they're on right now, where they believe they're better than us.
Yeah, so like that was so powerful, considering the fact that we are always aligned to the American shifts and we try to work according to them. It's not that we want the other people to suffer because of us, and we also want them to feel the same pain. It's just the fact that we know what our importance is, just being sort of equality, sort of promoting that.
Absolutely, right. And I think it's very important, because we can only have this price advantage for a short period of time, right? Because there'll always be somebody who can give the same service for cheaper. So that cannot be our USP. Our
Yeah.
USP has to be that we can give quality.
And sir, I would like to also know about Sabudh Foundation, and then your like goals in educating the youth, and then the internship or the fellowship programs that you people offer.
Sure. So essentially, 2 years ago, I was teaching on the ISB program in Mohali, on the CBA program. And while I was there, because that's a residential program, I actually spent 2 weeks in the ISB campus in Mohali. An uncle of mine who runs Bhai Haji Foundation in Chandigarh, that trains kids from rural Punjab to get into IIT and into medical, colleges. He basically told me, he said, you've got to go and talk to a number of colleges, and give talks there on AI and machine learning. And I was very lucky to be welcomed into IISER, into Tech, into Punjab University, up to Guru Nanak Dev Engineering College as well.
Yeah.
And since then, I've even spoken at Punjabi University in Patiala. And in each of these places, I was welcomed, and I met with a lot of kids that I felt that wanted to learn, but didn't have access to mentorship, right? And so at that point, we decided to set up Sabudh Foundation. And we purposely set it up in Mohali. because we wanted it to be Punjab centric. And I was very lucky to be aware of some work that a friend of mine, Raid Dhani, had done in the University of Chicago. So Raid had set up the Data Science for Social Good Center in the University of Chicago after he decided to give up his job in Accenture, where he was leading the data science lab. And he actually then got President Obama into the White House. Partly, he was the chief data scientist for his campaign, and then he decided he didn't want to be in politics but moved to the University of Chicago. And he started this whole idea of using data science for social good. And he would always say he got sick and tired of making rich people richer and wanted to make a difference instead. People who needed help. And so the idea of Sabudh was to try and replicate something like this, right? But I also understood that, while his center does not have a training component to it, we would need to provide a training component. And so we put up this 6-month program where we get final year students, typically from engineering colleges, mostly from Punjab. This year, we've actually got applications from Nigeria, Germany, Canada, America, and New Zealand as well. And we are considering those applications too. I wanted to put Punjab on the world AI map because I just feel that whenever anybody talked about AI, it was always Bangalore. And, I wondered why that's the case. And I don't still know why that's the case. Whenever I go to Bangalore, I find it, terrible to navigate through traffic and be in traffic for 2 hours to get anywhere. I just feel that there's also been some bad press, right? I mean, even MPs, of the current government have said that the skills don't exist in North India, which is complete nonsense, right? I mean, there's a lot of skills that from North India that have gone down to Bangalore. Yeah. And why would they want to be there? I don't know, right? Crazy as the idea might be, and we've not been very successful in that sense, but the idea is to create momentum in the north where we can actually get people to consider setting up even labs here, right? So why is it that when a company wants to set up an AI lab, they always think of Bangalore, they start thinking about Hyderabad potentially, or they think about Pune right now, and they have nothing to offer, right? I mean, unfortunately, maybe our government in Punjab has not been very welcoming to these people. I've heard of stories where the reason why ISB is in Hyderabad is because the then chief minister welcomed these people better than other states did, right? And we probably missed out on that opportunity. And I'm very lucky that during the Manmohan Singh government, we had an opportunity to develop the second ISB campus in Mohali and also the IISER Mohali, where I've been lucky to now be a adjunct faculty as well, and build a minor program in machine learning and data science there for students there. I think slowly Mohali is becoming an educational hub, which is very interesting. I don't know how this has happened and what the politics behind it is, but we have some very interesting, nationally recognized institutions coming up in Mohali. I think if we look at Punjab fed the country when it needed to be fed. Yeah. We defended the borders when they needed to be defended. Even, recently the whole, impact that the Punjab regiment had in the China conflict that's happening right now. Yeah. Everybody recognizes, right? Yeah. And unfortunately, whatever it is, we have now turned into a state that is failing, where people are running away because they don't believe there's a future to the state, where we have huge amounts of drug problems, where we have cancer because of the over pesticide use, right? Yeah. And so there are lots of problems. And, we need to try and address those problems.
Yeah, definitely.
So the idea of creating Sabudh was to get people, train them in AI machine learning and get them to work on social good problems. Right? So we're trying. I mean, it's funded only by the guru, so I'm sure when the time is right, it will become more powerful than anything else.
Yeah, you mentioned that it's like funded by Guru. So it's just the fact that when Guru Nanak Dev Ji funded the langar, and we can still see if Guru funds something, then the sort of impact that has. But another thing that I would like to really appreciate is the sort of vision that you guys have when you're talking about like making Punjab the AI hub. So like that's very important. And also, just a quick fact. So I was born in Chandigarh, and then we stayed at Mohali. I used to stay at Phase One Mohali.
Oh, right.
So
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
So I spent many summer vacations in Chandigarh because my grandfather, after he retired from the Punjab police, lived there. So I have very fond memories. I even, at one stage, like most 16-year-old boys in this country, thought I was going to become a cricketer. So I got an opportunity to go and train under Kapil Dev's coach there. But I didn't have the passion, right? Talking about it, I didn't have the passion to become a cricketer. I only saw the glory, and so it didn't last very long, right? And I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Coming back.
Yeah. Another important thing that we got out of the conversation was the fact that uh, Punjab not like maybe it's sort of a political thing that we are talking about, but I think that it's very important when we are talking about development, because in the end AI is something that brings development and it empowers the people. So I think that it should be talked about. So like when we talk about Punjab, so it Punjab or Chandigarh, it had great potential in terms of becoming the IT hub, but the policies either were not in favor, or like uh, it was not well planned, or maybe it was intentional, or what, we cannot comment about that part. But the fact that it did had the potential, and now then if Chandigarh also has the international airport, so the access is also huge. But still, so any comments on that, like?
Yeah, I think it's difficult, right? I mean, I always think that politics is such a dirty game, and so impossible to really for us minions to know what is really happening in it. But the truth of the matter is that we have to be very open to recognizing our own problems, right? And I think that if there's anything that is true, our politicians have definitely let down the state, whether it is state politics or national politics in both cases. And this has happened multiple times, right? If there is anything that we can say for ourselves that we've been terrible at, is creating leaders after Ranjit Singh. So after that, we've been let down when the partition took place. We've been let down ever since. I don't think we've had a leader that's really been able to stand up for us, as Punjab as a whole. And one of the greatest things that, Ranjit Singh is attributed with is the fact that he was not communal, right? He was just as open to a European coming and working for him as he was to a Muslim or a Hindu or a Sikh, right? And I think that's what made Punjab great. And until we realize that that is the only way Punjab can become great again and have leaders that can actually build that, which is ingrained in that land, right? We've never ever had a scenario where, like this, where we are standing, where we are pitting each other against each other, right? The Punjabis are were always special.
Yeah.
So, and I think these problems can be solved. Nothing is irreversible. I think if you read Osho's commentary on the Japji Sahib, he basically says that there's always rain happening, right? The blessings from God are always there. The one thing that you need to do as a whole is to be the right way, turned the right way to get filled with rain, right, or blessings. So we have to essentially face God and start the work that we need to do, and the rest is up to Him to decide on whether we are worth being blessed.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
we need to work towards it.
Yeah. So this was like a really great conversation when we were talking about all the political and the social impacts. Now let's come through to the data science part of it as well. Yeah,
From
because
data science to data science.
yeah. So now, another important thing that you were talking about was the fact that you need to place the utensil in which you need to get the knowledge poured in the right position. You need to position it well. So, like at this level that you are at, so what are your like learning resources? What are the people that inspire you, or maybe the books that you refer when learning?
Um, Primarily it is research papers, right, from archive. So you go and kind of look at those. In terms of learning resources, in Sabudh, what we have done is to put together a lot of open source resources that are available, for the students. So MIT's open courseware, some courses from Stanford, CMU, some of our own content we put together, and we get them to work on a project, right? So that's how they learn, is by actually trying to solve real problems. And then our focus is always that if you have to deal with a problem where there's not a lot of data, then collect data, tag the data, right? Nothing is too small a job for a data scientist. So, from that perspective, that's how we teach them. The resources, I mean, there aren't books out there. I mean, I think the field is moving too quickly for books to be out there that we can refer to. And to me, the main thing in Sabodh is that we need to make sure that the kids lose their apprehension or fear of mathematics, because you have to learn probability, you have to learn linear algebra, you've got to learn calculus, and without these three things, it really is very difficult for you to be able to pick up a paper and read it, right? So part of what we want these children to always be able to do is to present their understanding from a paper, right? So we get them to actually uh, read papers, present those papers, or even try and kind of create some applications, some actual coding around the paper to be able to show what it is. We get them to program algorithms from scratch rather than just use algorithms that are in libraries, right? And yes, some kids are frustrated with that because they know that there are algorithms, but then they've got to do it, right? And so that's kind of our approach to teaching there. But for my own learning, primarily it's papers, and I'm lucky that I have a few people now in Tatras who are also filtering some papers and giving it to me. I can look at once in a week.
Because there's always a lot of papers that you can go through. Like you talked about, like most of the things are noise. Then eventually figuring out what's the right thing to learn is also very important. Yeah. Another important thing, sir, that I would like to talk about, this is sort of a personal thing. So, like in everybody's life, there's a time or there's a moment which we call the character building incidents. So, be it in terms of your data science journey or your life in general. So, like if I talk about in terms of the software development journey of mine. So there was a project in which we had to do some sort of things that I was not, like you can say, prepared for, or I had never done before. But then because of the deadlines and all, uh, uh, initially I like feared that ये हो भी पाएगा कि नहीं. But then eventually because the thing was to be delivered in 2-3 days, so all of a sudden there was a mind shift ki rather than making excuses कि एक किਵੇਂ होएगा, it turned to the fact कि ਇਹਨੂੰ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਜਾ ਸਕਦਾ है. So eventually I was able to do that project, and after that whenever new problems come, so I refer to that situation and I feel like नहीं किਵੇਂ ना किਵੇਂ हो जाएगा. So that sort was in my case the character building incidents. Any incidents that you could share would be really insightful.
I guess when you get to my age, you'll realize that there isn't just one incident. There are many incidents. And or maybe my character was so bad that I needed a lot of incidents in my life. Um, I from a data science perspective, though, I think the journey that I've had since I started Tatras has been extraordinary, right? I, I out of my 22 years that I spent in the United Kingdom, a large part of that was in academia, and I had never worked in this country before in India. I did have a startup in the UK as well, and but the exposure that I've had in India since I came back has been extraordinary, and I think um, you know understanding people, their motivations, their desires,
Yeah.
dealing with the fact that no matter how much you try to do what is, you see is best for your staff and your colleagues, they will always see something different in it. They've
Yeah.
been real eye openers, right? And there were times where I almost got into this mode where I felt that I had to broaden people's horizons, right? Tell them what is right and what is wrong. And I went through that phase also, where I would get upset with them because they were behaving in what I considered as being not appropriate behavior. And all of those things, right, kind of happen. But during this period, there was one particular project that we got from an American startup, which was a particularly uh, challenging project, and it was actually to build a platform for uh, learning chatbots from human to human chat transcripts. And they wanted to incorporate a number of different signals, right? So it wasn't just about what was being said that you had to respond to. You had to kind of understand this person who's talking, right? So this is a car salesman chatbot, and the
Okay.
person who's coming in, the way they are talking, they're very visual in their talking, or
Yeah.
they're very tactile in their talking, right? And so you had to pick up those signals also and respond. And at that time, the whole TensorFlow infrastructure was also limited. There were various challenges there, and we went on to start building this platform under very tight timelines. And at that point, I hadn't really started doing Python development for projects. Whether that day, that project, I decided, right, I need to jump in and actually work with them. And we spent nights and days, and my wife would bring me our dinner for all of us from home and feed us and go back. And that was to me a really enjoyable experience
Yeah.
that taught me a lot, right? And so I think that was definitely from a learning perspective one project that I would say was very challenging and very exciting to do.
Yeah.
Um, but learning can happen everywhere, right? So, like I said, I mean, learning can happen. As an entrepreneur, you learn to, uh, you know, from your end, develop great stuff and get pushed back by the customer and
Yeah.
not know, what to do there, right? And then how do you deal with that? And this particular customer was very aggressive at one point, and I just told him, look, if you can't talk with respect, I'm not going to work with you, right? And not for me; it was with my colleagues, right? My staff that he was actually giving a hard time to, and I put him right in that scenario. So that was good. That was a good learning. That was a learning to say that you've got to work for people not as their slaves. You've got to work as equals. You've got to work and make sure that there's respect on both sides. And if that respect can't be achieved, then it's not worth
Yeah.
working on that project.
Definitely. So, another important aspect out of your conversation was the fact that you like in the end you get tired when you are trying to working, you're like putting in the all-nighters, working all night and all that. At that point when you are in pain, you like this is the worst thing, but eventually when the pain fades away, then you feel sort of a relief, and then the fact that you stayed till the end. So that's like it's very fulfilling experience. So, uh, so then it brings us to the last question of this interview, which sort of a two-part question. So first of all, the first question is, so like, what's the biggest fear of a data scientist? Like you being the chief data scientist, what's the biggest thing that haunts you? And then the second question is like, what's the most fulfilling experience about this job, the chief data scientist?
So I always say that I am just a self-styled chief data scientist, right? Because I was the founder, so it wasn't difficult for me to give that myself that same title. So I wouldn't put too much weightage on the title. I think the biggest joy that a data scientist can get is when they see that what they have created actually has an impact on the business that they are building that for, right? And nothing can be more joyous than actually doing that. What is the nightmare? I don't think there is any such thing as a nightmare, right? I think I'm a great believer in the fact that everything is an opportunity.
A little context that maybe will be able to trigger you, like as a software developer, the thing that haunts me is a bug that I have in a code that I'm not able to get it, and even when I'm eating my dinner, eating rajma chawal, in that time I'm thinking, ki yaar, why is that not working?
Yeah, and you have a lot of that happen in data science, right? Why is my model not actually producing accuracies that I expect it to, right? So what can I change? Why is it that it's I've done everything right, but it's doing something silly? So there was one particular case where we were building a matrix factorization based recommender of keywords for companies, and you only had a binary vector there of 1 and 0, and we were getting results that were completely unexplainable, and we had done all the right things, right? We had added in some values that were kind of that you need to do in a matrix of that kind to make it come up with sensible results. And yet what was happening was that with most companies, we were getting the same recommendations come out. And it's like, what the hell's going on here? And we thought about this for a long time. And then we finally had to kind of sit down and go through the data and understand the distributions of the data, which led us to come up with an innovative way of distributing these small, low valued inserts that we do into the matrix in an innovative way that allowed us to get around that problem, right? So these kind of things do come up, and I think this is exactly the kind of example where data scientists who only learn the libraries are going to fail, because they don't know why the libraries are not giving the right result. They don't know how the algorithm works, right? And so that is why, this is my favorite example, right? For trying to explain to people that, it's not about learning libraries, it's about understanding the maths behind it. Because if you don't understand the maths behind it, you're not going to be able to solve the problem.
Definitely.
Or even attempt to solve the problem. I'm not suggesting that you can solve every problem today with machine learning. Yeah. But even trying to solve the problem becomes impossible. Yeah. All you will do is you'll say this library is useless.
It's about developing that core and keep on trying and having that patience is what I can conclude that this entire process of being a data scientist gives you or requires you to have. So sir, in the end, any special like message for the youth who are trying to break into this field? Obviously when we were discussing through the entire interview, there have been a lot of things that the youth will definitely get out of it, but then eventually everyone wants the 2 3 best tips how to lose the fat or that sort of fancy thing. So what are the top three in that sense?
So I think be truthful to yourself is really, really important,
Yeah.
right? And pursue learning for the sake of learning, not for getting a job.
Yeah.
I know it's difficult. It's easy for me to say um, in a time when unemployment is on the increase, but you can only be valuable to a company if you actually have good understanding of what you are supposed to be employed to do,
Yeah.
right? And you will get caught out if you don't have the skills,
Yeah.
right? So there's no point in stuffing your CV with fancy keywords. You will get caught out. And actually, you will only cause more unemployment if you do that, and people decide that AI doesn't work, right? So I think really be truthful to yourself and don't run after the money. Money will run after you if you don't run after it. Right? Run after skills, and with those two things, I think also be, appreciate what the company can give to you, and also what you can give to the company, right?
Yeah.
Because too often
It's both ways. Yeah.
it is both ways, right? And if a company is not good, then don't join them. There are companies that try and tie people into 18-month contracts, right, where they a bond,
Never.
and I say this is modern day slavery, right? So
Yeah.
you should never join a company that does that. So just say no. Have the self belief to say no. Because if all of you say no to such practices, then companies like this will not exist,
Yeah.
right? Have the self belief, and you can only have self belief if you are good at what you do. So focus on getting good at what you do rather than getting a job.
Yeah, definitely. So it has definitely triggered another question that I would not get into in this specific interview. Maybe let's keep it for some other time. But definitely, new job interviews are giving the people in the data science domain who want to join assignments. Those assignments are actually real world problems, and the community is facing this problem that they are trying to get solutions from you, but then eventually you don't get called up. So that's like sort of not very wise thing to do. Just triggered me in that sense.
Yeah, well, I think it's still worth doing those problems,
Yeah.
right? I think if you are that good that you can give a solution that the industry can actually use, there'll be one company out of 10 that won't employ you. 9 will employ you.
Yes.
So I think this is a ego trip more than anything. Where people think we are so good that companies are looking for us to solve their problems but won't give us a job, right? The truth is that if you actually have that in your portfolio and you can say, "Hey, here's a solution I created," the company that tricks you like this and takes your solution and doesn't kind of give you a job, they won't last very long.
Yeah. Yeah.
But your
So
skills will last. So you should still do it.
yeah,
Don't fear doing solving a problem.
so
I
it's
think
all. Yeah. Yeah.
I think sometimes people actually use this as an excuse not to work hard.
Yeah, definitely. It's always about thinking how one can improve, how one can raise the standards. So definitely, it's about how we raise our standards. So, so sir, like, if I conclude the entire discussion, and the one thing that I can be is just generous and be grateful of the fact that you like said yes for this interview. So like Maharaj says, Satto Peri Sat Pala Bhaye Padya Paas. So which means that it's always enriching and enlightening when you are in the sangat of the learned people. So I it's like after some sort of a conversation when you feel really happy and you're like really in the zone. So that means that the other guy is also has got something which really impacts you, that energy, that positivity.
I'd only correct you by saying I'm not that learned, that I should be in that group of learned people. So thank you very much for putting me there, but I don't deserve to be there. So thank you. It was very enjoyable talking to you,
Yes, sir.
and best of luck with your channel. And I hope you continue to grow it and
Yes, sir.
inspire people. Okay,
Yes, sir. Thanks a lot.
thanks.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.